Hello everybody and welcome back to You Can't Win. This is Tom here and I'm joined by Don as usual. Today we're going to be talking about a few random real life stuff. Don's been thinking about getting a driver's license, thinking about getting back into cars or whatever. And then we also had some ideas about Marx and morality and whether he had a particular idea about morality or whether it was something that is just an artifact of capitalism or something along those lines. So yeah, let's kick off with this car stuff. What have you been up to,
Don? So my driver's license expired. You can get here. I don't know how it works there, but here you get a trainer's license kind of thing. It's called graduated licensing, where you get a first level kind of thing. It lasts up to 5 years kind of thing, and then if you don't renew it, then you can't renew it. You have to kind of take the written test. There's a 20 question multiple choice written test. And it is basically a logic test kind of thing, right? It's about car stuff, but it's basically if you think about it, you're not really going to be able to know the answer just independently. You kind of have to know it'll be 4 questions. Four multiple choice things. And then one of them will be it'll be okay, what do you do in a skid situation or something like that? And then you kind of have to choose the one that is the best of the options and stuff. So I know very little about this kind of stuff, all the different signs and all that kind of stuff, all the different snow signs or whatever, all the different technical stuff. So it's funny because it's aimed at 16-year-olds, but it's I'm puzzling over it as if it's as hard as the linear algebra courses I've taken or something like that kind of thing. I'm just I have no idea. And but you have to go. So what you do is you go and you have to pay a fee and stuff. But and that includes it's a package kind of thing, including the road test for the second level and all that kind of stuff. And if you fail the written test, that's embarrassing. It's happened to me before. And you have to pay another $16 to take it again. So I've been reading through the handbook, whatever, trying to learn all the different ins and outs of what you're supposed to do. It's because the questions usually are things that you might not remember offhand kind of thing. It's okay, what are the hand signals you give if your lights are out of order or something like that kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And it's just little things like that you just have to kind of remember. And so I'm kind of working through it. But yeah, so I don't know. It's a bit irritating, but yeah, we'll see how it goes. I don't know. So, but it's just one of those things where we talked about it before, a year or two ago, I think. But it would make my life so much better in a lot of ways if I did drive. So. I live in a place that is designed 100% for cars. You can't get around anywhere else.
Right, yeah.
And there's no bus that runs to my area and stuff. And yeah, so even being able to drive into the train station and then go to Toronto or something like that by myself, and that would be a lot better than the current situation. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't really remember too well the driver's test and all that, but I think the way it worked for me, and I don't know if this is different from state to state, but I did this in Washington. I think you get 2 chances to do the written test to pass it, per time that you pay for it. And I failed the first time and I passed the second time. And from what I remember, a lot of it, like you said, is sort of almost common sense. It's what lane should you be in if you want to turn right, and it's left, center, or right lane. It's kind of obvious you don't want to be on the left lane and turn across all the other lanes. But then there were those, and then some which were just straight you just have to have looked it up and memorized it. It's what is the speed limit on this or whatever. Just stuff that isn't logical in any sense. It's just you have to know it. Yeah. And then there was the practical driving test after that, which I didn't feel like I did super well. I thought I did okay, but I passed it. I think that's really just up to the teacher. They're very...
Oh, really?
It seems like it's very instructor dependent. Some of them are going to be really harsh. Some of them are not going to care at all. And it's just luck of the draw.
Yeah, I just need to get some driving experience and then see how it goes from there. I do worry a lot that like when I mentally imagine sort of driving around and stuff, or if I'm in a car and kind of thinking about, if I were driving and stuff like that, I feel like I would have a hard time keeping track of everything at the same time consistently over a period of time. Like making sure you're going the right speed and making sure that like you're checking your blind spot and all that kind of stuff, whatever, like all the small things. I guess it becomes, we talked about this before too, but like, yeah, just like it becomes second nature, I guess. But like,
Yeah.
I don't know. So I always feel like, because the only like equivalent I have is like just walking around or stuff. And walking around to me feels like, it feels like I'm on an obstacle course all the time. Like if I'm like in a store or something, I feel like people are just like I'm under siege from them or something. Like they're trying to walk into me. They're trying to hit me or something. You know what I mean? Like they're like,
yeah.
it's as if everyone is just bouncing around. And so the idea that like I would have that same feeling, but like in a car, and then like the risks and of that, it's like horrifying to me. But it's one of those things where I have to sort of bracket that and then go, I'm just going to get in a car and see what happens. And then maybe it will be different. So,
yeah, most people don't die, I guess, right? So,
so.
Yeah, there's this thing Hamza Yusuf said, which is like one of his ideas about like how it's very obvious that there are like angels and stuff protecting people, is that there aren't incredible amounts of car accidents, that like most people are able to get in a car and get to where they need to go without like, suffering an injury or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's just insane. I've always thought that kind of, not about angels in particular, but just like, I don't really trust the idea of like lanes being, I don't know, they're just lines painted on a ground.
Sure.
And, these are like 2-ton pieces of metal going like 90 miles an hour sometimes. Like, it just seems like everything tends to work out most of the time, but it kind of feels like, I don't know. It seems like the odds are against it, but it kind of makes me nervous.
Yeah, it's very strange. And so I don't know. And the other thing that I don't know anything about really is like car maintenance kind of stuff, and like, like making sure all your fluids are okay or whatever and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And the other related to that is that like, I guess I just need more experience in the car because I have no real, like, there's certain cars I can look at and go, okay, those look cool, but I have no real like knowledge of like the differences between the different cars kind of thing. Like,
yeah, me neither.
I can kind of like see the numbers and stuff, but like I don't know, like, on paper I'm like, oh, I'll just get like a small car that's cheap or something like that kind of thing, and then it's like, yeah, but maybe I'll feel cramped in a small car or something like that, or maybe I'll feel like I might as well get like a sedan with like 4 doors so that like it's like if I need the room or for something, or you know what I mean, like I don't know, it's very it's stuff I should have figured out 20 years ago maybe, but like I don't know, it's interesting, I don't know, so
yeah, I remember learning all that like car maintenance stuff from my dad when I was like a kid. He loves tinkering with his car and just working on it and stuff, so he would always like have me help him and try to teach me stuff and everything, and it just doesn't really stick when you don't have practical experience to apply that, like
Sure.
You can kind of get it in the moment, but then like the next day I don't know, if you don't need to do it yourself, it doesn't really stick. So
sure.
I'm not sure. Maybe if I did have a car and I just started to like work on it, maybe that would all come back. But I've always just it's never made sense for me to have a car. Like whether it was because I was just traveling all the time, or like now I live in a city where public transportation just makes more sense than having a car generally. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it would be handy for sure. And it's definitely a skill that's good to have, right? Like that's one thing that's come up a few times. I did pass the driver's test. I know how to drive in like a basic sense, but I just don't have a lot of experience driving, so it's not something I feel super comfortable doing. And it's just tricky, right? Like, 'cause if you don't have to drive, or if it doesn't make sense to drive, you don't get the experience. But then I don't know. It sort of feels like a catch-22 or something.
Sure. Do you have a spot, like a parking spot at your new place, or?
I'm not sure, but it's definitely not hard to get parking.
Okay.
Like, for whatever reason, a lot of people just don't park right outside. So, like, when people have visited and stuff, I don't think there's ever been a time when they haven't been able to just park right outside. We kind of like, the apartment's kind of like right at a sort of a dead end-ish kind of a spot. It's not exactly a dead end, but there's not a lot of traffic going through there. So I think, yeah, I don't think a lot of people are trying to park there. So it's nice.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So I guess prices have gone up for cars in the last year or so, 2 years, because of COVID and stuff. People are taking public transportation, so like used cars are more expensive, and new cars are, they're being sold, I guess, kind of thing. It's like, so I don't know. So that's one thing I'm gonna have to think about too, is like, how much do I actually want to, if I did buy a car, like how much would I want to spend on it and stuff. So, or if I wanted to get like a loan or something. Yeah, I don't know. It's all tricky kind of stuff I have to kind of figure out. So
yeah, the cost of it is the other thing that's really just been. It's not something that's just like, oh well, maybe it would be convenient to have, so I'll just get one. It costs a lot of money, right? You really need to like get your value out of it, and I just don't see that happening. So at least for me, right? Like for you, I think it makes a lot more sense.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah. Especially because then I can get out to like different events and stuff, and maybe volunteer somewhere or something like that. It's easier to do it that. It's not really viable if I have to be like, mom, drive me to volunteer somewhere or something like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So the same way. So
you should get like a PA system, and you could do Bad News Hughes stuff, drive around town.
Yeah. Like what do you call it? Like oh no, okay. I thought you meant like a GoPro or something. I could do like car rants, like Big Dave and stuff like that.
So. No. I mean, like, like they have them for political campaigns.
Sure.
Or, stuff like that.
Sure. Yeah, so I don't know. That's one thing I've been thinking about lately.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know. I feel like the whole car culture thing is changing. Like I think for like boomers and maybe the generation before them, cars were just something that it was like an automatic kind of thing that you would get, and it was like a big part of like becoming an adult, and it was pretty, I don't know, it just seemed like a very like obvious part of life,
Yeah.
In a maybe similar way that like home ownership was sort of like an assumed thing for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. I think car ownership was similar, and it feels like that's changing now. It seems like people in cities are really moving away from having cars unless they just have the money to spend on it, just because they, for the convenience of it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's different for people out in like towns and stuff, kind of like you, right? Like the whole town is built around the idea of people having cars, and there's not a lot of good at public transportation. So I don't think like cars are going away or anything like that, but it just feels like things are changing, especially for like urban situations. So I'm not really sure. Like I remember in London, they have this thing that you have to like pay to drive for a given day. So like if you want to use your car on a given day, you have to like register for it or something. You pay like a certain amount so that you can have permission to drive it that day.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
In like the downtown areas, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how widespread that is. Like if it's just like the city of London, or which is like, that very small part of the lowercase c city, right? There's like the capital C city of London, and then there's the broader city. I don't know how much that covers, but that's just interesting.
I think,
like trying to keep traffic down and everything, I guess.
The problem is that like for in North America is that like car owners have a lot of political power in different ways for lots of reasons.
Oh yeah.
And they just like any sort of thing like this, they go crazy, basically. Like any sort of minor reform or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily see that happening in North America,
sure,
but it's just sort of interesting that, and I think it makes a little bit more sense in like a European city. Like a lot of those places are built on old pre-car cities, so a lot of the streets and stuff aren't really well designed for cars.
Yeah. But
in North America, it's the exact opposite. Pretty much everything is like designed specifically for cars, almost.
Yeah.
So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I maybe like Uber and Lyft and all this kind of stuff becomes more. I don't think it'll stay exactly the way it is now, but I think that is approaching some kind of model that we might be transitioning into. More like a rental kind of a situation or something.
Yeah, they do have, I think it's in Montreal, it's called like a Communauto or something, where it's like a car sharing service kind of thing where you rent a car for like, just a few hours or something like that. And there's like cars, it's sort of like the bike share services, except that it's for cars. So they are sort of spread out throughout the city, and then you just kind of walk up to one or whatever. I think that's how it works for a lot of it. You just sort of walk up to one and then take it, and do your driving for the day or whatever, and then you just pay a rate based on whatever. And then you also pay like a system fee, like, annual fee or something like that to be able to use it. And so that seems like an interesting thing too, because it's like, you do got to think that like, for a lot of people, for most of the day, they don't need the car, even if they need a car sometimes, kind of thing. So
yeah.
I mean, really, a lot of this stuff with the cars and that, you got to think in terms of like families, I guess, is the thing too. Like, it's very easy for me to think in terms of just walking around or doing stuff kind of thing. But you got to think of people that are like, have 2 kids with them while they're doing all this stuff and that. And a lot of the time that makes public transit a lot less, in its current form, like a lot less attractive kind of thing. Because that's the thing is, the debate in Toronto and a lot of that stuff, a lot of it, the left wing sort of thing, focuses on the price, like the fact that it costs like $3 or whatever for subway token or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, or ticket now, I guess. And like the way that they, it's like, well, this is so expensive that if you're like, if you're very, very poor, you can't afford transit, basically. Like you have to, you can only, I don't know, you either are paying a lot of your income out of it, to just get around, or you're just not doing it at all because, just the price is not worth it, kind of thing too.
Yeah, but it limits job opportunities. I've experienced that myself, where it's like, okay, it costs me $3 to get there, $3 to get back, and then that's like maybe an hour of the wage that I would be, like it's not great.
But the problem is that like, people say stuff like, well, it gets people out of cars and into transit if you lower the transit fee, but cars are so much more expensive than transit right now.
Yeah,
that's not really the decision point kind of thing, right? Like you might be paying thousands of dollars a year to have a car, and then a bus pass for the whole year might be like $1,200, $1,300 or something like that kind of thing, right? So it's like no one is making that decision based on cost,
right?
Directly, they're making it based on the fact that like it is very, very convenient to have a car compared to having to sit on a transit system that breaks down 3 times while you're on it, and you might not get there on time, and there's a guy on the streetcar that's yelling at you because he's high or whatever, and you know what I mean? Like it's like there's so many other things that go into the reason why you're not doing it, that the focus on the cost is it's easy because it unites every single person and it's visible and it's economic, but like the real issue is like coverage and stuff like that, and like trying to get people, it's stuff like making it so that it's dependable is one big thing, because a lot of people can't take it because it takes them way too long. It might break down for half an hour or something like that, and then you're not there on time, and that's not, for a lot of jobs that's just not negotiable. You can't be late every day or every other week or whatever, kind of thing. And that was my experience when I lived in Toronto, is that things were just constantly broken. And it wasn't that like, 95% of the system would be working okay most of the time. But if you're traveling large distances, every day or whatever, part of the system in your trip every day would be broken or something like that kind of thing, right? Like it just, anyways, that's just the experience. Or you might have to have a long wait, or basically you have a minor bad experience with the system every day. And I mean, people don't enjoy traffic. That's not, that's its own thing too. But like, there's a difference between being stuck in traffic in a car and being stuck in traffic on, like, say, a hot streetcar that tells you have to get off and then get on again and all this kind of stuff, like, I don't know. So, yeah.
Yeah. That sounds, I don't know, like, I haven't experienced that many problems with things breaking down. Is that like a pretty bad issue in Canada? Or?
I found it with Toronto, but it might have been really just, maybe it was like the routes that I was taking or something, but like,
okay.
I find that like there's lots of days where, like, say the trains wouldn't be running right. They'd have to like bring on emergency buses to get things working, or just all the time. I would run into problems, and at the very least it would be like problems to the point where you can't depend on it for like, I couldn't, like, say, go to a doctor's appointment unless I like booked in, an extra half hour just to try to get there early so that I knew that I wouldn't be delayed a lot.
Yeah, just account for that kind of stuff. Man, that sucks. So,
yeah.
I've definitely like had issues like that. I've been using public transportation to get to work for probably 6 years or so, something like that. And I can't remember a time that I've been like late because of it, but I think I've also had maybe good luck with that, because there's definitely been plenty of times where it's just been like on the way back home, I've been adding an extra hour or something because things broke down.
Sure.
I think a lot of times there's like alternatives, especially like here in Chicago, right? Like if you take the train, you can get off at a certain station and just take a bus, and it will pretty much get you there. And if everything kind of fails, there's always like Uber and stuff like that. And then they also usually have like shuttles running when things aren't working. Generally you're not going to be super, super late.
Yeah. The other thing I can't handle is it'll be very common for, at peak times, for the trains to just be so full, like subways, to be so full that you can't get anyone else on them.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And
I hate that.
And so what I end up doing, because I can't handle that. I can't just be packed in there or else I'll freak out or whatever, right? And so what I end up doing is just sitting there for maybe like half an hour or so or more, just waiting for all the trains that are full to go by until there's one that where like there might be a bit of space and stuff. Instead of trying to squeeze on, because people try to squeeze on like sardines, whatever. But like it just, I can't. I don't know. I can't handle that. So it's one of those things where there's so many experiences that are like negative associated with it that are like, that could be solved with more funding and stuff like that don't relate directly to price. So
Yeah, I will tend to wait for things to clear up too. It really depends though. Like if it's the coldest part of winter and it's like, negative 20 or something, I will just get in. I'll just try to make it work. But I guess, I don't know, it really depends how frequently like trains are running, right? Like for me here in Chicago, it's probably like 15 minutes tops that you have to wait. So that's pretty reasonable. And a lot of times it's just like one or two cars that are the big packed ones. And often if they're packed, it's been, they're much slower. So they kind of come in this like caravan style, so it's like instead of waiting 15 minutes, it's like one and then the next one's right behind it and the one's right behind it. So then it's kind of more like three cars or three trains that are kind of like bunched up together, and like the first one might be packed, the second one might be packed, but the third one will have more room, and you just need to kind of be smart about it and wait for that last one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there is actually in the sort of small neighboring town, there is actually a bus service that I used to use when I lived had my own apartment in that town, and it was for a long time. It was basically like the bus would come once an hour,
Yeah.
and that wasn't like that, you know, especially for someone like me that's like not really. I mean, at the time and stuff, especially like not really on top of things, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
To be like, and not just that, but like the bus will come sometimes like 10 minutes early, and then, you know,
Yeah,
like
that's
they're not
the
supposed
worst.
to do that, but
Yeah.
and then stuff like that. So that I just, you know, yeah, it just screws up your whole day basically if you're trying to get to like across town or whatever. So, especially again for like an appointment, you just can't do that. You have to take a taxi then or something. So,
Yeah. I mean, long story short, commuting in general just sucks.
either
Either you're paying out the nose for a car, or you're having to deal with
Yeah.
all these problems with public transportation.
Sure.
So the work from home thing, that I know not everyone's doing that right now, and that's not possible for everybody. So I feel bad for people that still have to go into work during all this stuff, but it's been pretty nice to not have to think about that kind of thing. It seems like I'll be able to continue doing that for a little bit longer. So
Yeah.
yay for me. Yeah, Tabs 2 is also going to be doing that, I think. I think they were originally thinking about getting people back in next month, actually. It would have been September that they would have been getting their people back in, but I think they're delaying that a little bit.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess I work from home, but like sort of, but like I write articles and stuff. But like, yeah. So, anyways, as you can see, there's lots of little reasons why it'd be good for me to be. There's even like sort of like regional there's like regional transit around Toronto that goes not like I'm pretty far out, so it just goes far out as us, but it goes like if I drove for like 45 minutes or so, there would be like a train there kind of thing I could take, which is a lot cheaper and a lot more frequent. So if I like say tomorrow we're going to a baseball game, so we're going to drive to that train station and then get into Toronto that way, and it's not great, but it is pretty convenient, and so eventually that's something that I could look forward to too. I could if I was driving regularly, I could theoretically could commute to doing things in Toronto like that. So that's one reason why it would be good for me to get to that point eventually, and that would be a lot cheaper to do that than like to say get an apartment in Toronto or something. So
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see how it goes.
Is there a big push in Canada towards like electric cars and stuff? Because that seems to be a thing here.
Yeah, there is. They sort of they start and stop a lot of these like tax credits and bonuses and all these little like incentives and all that kind of stuff. So it exists in Canada. It's basically the same, I think, scale as the United States, or maybe slightly more or something like that. But there's always like promotions, and then they get canceled and stuff, and because the costs are actually pretty high to do that. A lot of this stuff, it's like because you got to think of the distribution and stuff. The people that are buying it tend to be much better off, kind of thing. So if you're giving tax credits to them to do something like to help them buy a car, it's like
it doesn't make a lot of sense.
It's fine if you have like it's sort of okay, but if you're like thinking about it in terms of equity and all that, there's lots of reasons why it's sort of like on the edge. And they do have like more. I've seen more like power charging stations and all that kind of stuff, and
yeah, we've got one of those right by our apartment.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's in a Walgreens parking lot. It just feels like, it's nothing special. There's nothing around it that would make sense that like, oh yeah, it's right next to like some electric car shop or something, right? Like it's just in a Walgreens parking lot in a kind of a middle of the road neighborhood. It's not wealthy, it's not poor, it's just kind of in the middle. And it's also not, I guess it is off a somewhat major street, but yeah, there's that just kind of says something to me, that they're just becoming more prevalent. And I've seen a lot of car companies are saying stuff like they're going to move entirely to electric vehicles. They're transitioning into that. And I guess like the government is doing that with like buses and the postal cars, whatever they're called.
Oh yeah. I don't know. I could see buying some of that. The thing is that like, for me, I'm just the price point is probably just going to be like a used sedan from a number of years ago kind of thing, like it,
sure.
Be, so I was looking at some of that stuff the other day because the prices have kind of you can get like used hybrids for like reasonable amounts and stuff, but the problem is that like I don't know about the quality of the batteries and all that kind of stuff. Like there's a lot of costs involved in that, in maintaining them and stuff, and the technology seems to be changing so quickly that I don't even know if it'd be worthwhile to buy like a used hybrid or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, it's one of those things where it does fit into my like, prefer the better option if it's available and affordable and stuff like that. It does kind of fit into that worldview kind of thing, but like, I don't know. So they still seem a lot of them seem kind of just beyond viability or something like that still, but
yeah. So I was just more thinking about like the future, like when we're old and gray. I feel like electric is sort of going to be the thing, but more than that, like I think AI is going to be a little bit more integrated into the whole deal. So I'm just thinking about like the car sharing services, and if stuff like that starts to become more mainstream and more of like the normal car experience, like it'd be kind of interesting. I don't know. I think things might be significantly different, besides just being electric. It might be like, somehow the cars will be like distributed through this like AI thing. It'll like put cars in different places for you to get, and like it'll just kind of through algorithms or whatever, like understand where cars ought to be and where the demand is. And I don't know, it'd be kind of interesting. Almost like a pseudo public kind of a thing.
Sure. The automation part of it is interesting, but it seems like the main I think they call it like closed loop or something like that. So it's right now, the main sort of uses of the automation and stuff is in sites that are under total private control or some sort kind of thing. It's like, like ports use it a lot now. There's ports that are like pretty close to fully automated, and
that's cool.
A lot of like, so I can imagine stuff like parking lots or something like that being automated.
Sure, you just pull into the parking lot and then the automation takes over.
Yeah, It's got to be something where they have control over the number of people in an area so that they're not getting hurt from, getting involved in, getting in the way of a car that hits them or something like that kind of thing. So that I mean, not for like the technology, but for the risk and regulatory kind of stuff. So the interesting thing about that, though, I think, is that you can kind of imagine it creeping out from there kind of thing then, like more and more situations where there's like sort of closed environments that, sort of mesh with the existing system more and more. And I don't know. Yeah, I think that's probably part of the future kind of thing. And then eventually, I mean, the dream is obviously they try to get the truckers to be replaced in a lot of ways, but I don't know how long that's going to be. But like, I mean, eventually, you can imagine that they will just create whole closed loop kind of infrastructure too, or something like that, where you can drive and there are normal roads and stuff, but then there might be, parallel systems of basically, like for intercity and stuff like that. You can imagine basically the equivalent of like a train or something like that for that. I know that's what like Tesla's been saying about like for underground kind of stuff or something, but you can kind of imagine a system where there's like a closed highway or something like that, where once you get onto the highway, it's automated or for you kind of thing.
That'd be cool.
And stuff like that. I can imagine that. And so I think that'd be cool.
Yeah. I mean, it sucks for the truckers, right? But I mean,
well, the truckers might be, it might you can imagine their job getting better in some ways, if you can imagine that like a lot of these trucks there might be ways to kind of get around it and stuff, or ways to, I don't know. I think that a lot of it is like sort of like in between kind of things or something like that, where you might have a trucker involved in the truck, like installing the truck and stuff, but like you can imagine them being lower skilled, lower paid or something like that. And I mean, you don't want that to happen, but I mean in terms of like it could be like an average wage or something like that or whatever, within systems that are mostly automated, so they're just sort of there doing, assisting and stuff.
Yeah,
like
like
that
train
kind of
operators,
so.
basically.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess we've talked about this before, but like, if something like that happens, it will kind of affect a lot of things on a kind of second order sort of thing. Like, there's a lot of towns that rely on truckers, and I mean, I think people tend to kind of cry about that a little. I mean, it sucks for those people, right? Like, that's their livelihood and stuff. But I mean, those aren't especially good situations, and they're sort of like built on something that is, I don't know. It's you can't just keep it around just because we want to keep people working in like some diner. You know what I mean? Like that's it's not a real solution. That's not something that's necessarily like worth keeping around. You want to do something to help those people, but I think people kind of sometimes like get kind of dramatic about like, oh, but think about the lady working in the 24/7 greasy spoon over in this tiny little town of 500 people. And it's like, well, okay, but it already sucks for her. And then if the cafe that she works at closes down, I mean,
Well, the truth is that like a lot of this problem is that we've got these huge imbalances all over the world that are
right. Yeah.
Like, I mean, it is true at the end of the day that it is sort of irrational that we import all these things from very far.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so it's one of those things where you can imagine an ideal situation where there is a transition more towards like producing locally where it makes sense and stuff in more small scale factories and all this kind of stuff or whatever. It's sort of like, efficiency doesn't have to necessarily come from making it the biggest factory in the world. It could be like efficient in terms of being local to where it's being produced and all that kind of stuff. But we haven't been at that point yet, kind of thing, because I mean, basically because there's no planning involved in like actual human needs a lot of the time. And so there is to a certain extent in terms of like, okay, we need schools and hospitals. There's like amenities kind of thing that are planned, but not like, not, it's not like the government is like, okay, we need to come up with a plan to make truckers feel more comfortable on the job over the next 10 years or something. You know what I mean? There's no one whose job that is. Even like just basic inspections of the actual factories and everything that we have now are pretty under developed, and very deliberately so. Like Chomsky used to harp on this a lot about like how the state is basically like openly criminal on a lot of this kind of stuff, just like openly like not inspecting factories and all this kind of stuff. So I don't know. So yeah, that's the thing, is we're so underdeveloped as a society to some extent that it's like that's the problem. So
yeah, like the shipping stuff all over the world. Like the thing that really struck me was when I was living in Washington. They grow a lot of apples. They grow a lot of everything there, right? Like it's a big agricultural state. So you can get local produce and stuff, but you can also buy stuff from like apples from like Chile and Peru and all these kind of places. And in some stores, I couldn't actually get Washington apples. I could only get these like South American imported apples and stuff. And already the idea of like importing fresh produce is like from other countries is just crazy to me. I mean, it's one thing if it's like right over the border. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking like, packing a freighter full of it and like going to a different continent. Like that's kind of nuts. Yeah. But when I moved to Jordan, I was able to find Washington apples. Like they had U.S. apples there.
Oh, really?
And I was just like, this is crazy. I have to go to the Middle East to get apples that are grown in the state
Yeah.
where I couldn't buy them there.
Sure. I mean, I understand the economics of why that ends up happening a lot of the time, just because of the costs involved and all that.
Yeah.
And the fact that like actually shipping stuff by sea and all that tends to be very, very cheap a lot of the time. So it's not necessary, but it's just it speaks to the uneven development of the world kind of thing, right? Where it is efficient like that because you have people working for very low wages in a foreign land or something like that kind of thing. So yeah, like if people in Mexico or whatever were earning the same wages as someone, or nearby, a lot of the time, there would be a lot less of that, at least, so
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I figured it was something like that. I don't know the exact specifics of like, oh, why does this make sense?
No.
But it just struck me as like, this doesn't make sense on some basic level,
No. Yeah, I'm saying that it makes sense in like a weird economics brain way, but it doesn't make sense in terms of like, ideal planning of a society or something like that. So, yeah.
Right.
So the other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was that someone the other day was talking about Marx and sort of Marx's view of the state and politics and morality and all that kind of stuff. And like my sort of default position on this has been a lot of this kind of stuff is like, like people always say, well, Marxism is not about morality. It's about like the working class perspective of like trying to topple capitalism and all this kind of stuff. It's not really about like trying to build the perfect moral society or something. It's more, it's not about like doing the best thing for in individual moral terms and stuff, so that like, it's more about like this process that then extrapolates kind of into revolution that, and I always thought that was kind of, at any given point, I thought that was kind of a bit cheap, because it's like, I don't know, like it's like, okay, if there's no morality, then like what, there's obviously some sort of morality, there's obviously some sort of thing that you're talking about in terms of like what we should be doing, what, how we should be approaching moral situations and all this kind of stuff. And I was always like, well, it does sound silly, but it's like, that's just, that's because we're so used to thinking of morality as like just kind of, weird people talking about like, you shouldn't smoke pot or something like that kind of, you know what I mean? Like just really kind of cynical kind of stuff, or like, I don't know. So anyway, someone brought up, they were talking about how Marx's view on this, that explained it a bit better and stuff. And so I bought the related book by Alan Wood, and I haven't finished reading it yet, but it's like there's a sort of section on it that someone recommended that was sort of about this sort of, the question of whether or not he's aiming to build a particular social society that has certain kind of institutions, certain type of politics or something like that, or if he's just trying to transcend all of our existing categories and stuff like that kind of thing. And to me, this was one of the reasons why I was interested in socialism and stuff like that, was that I thought that seemed more reasonable, that like that in the future it would just be like different socialist institutions that would be more democratic and all that kind of stuff. That made sense to me. I never really understood the full communism kind of stuff as like a political system or something like that. Like the idea that like you would get rid of politics altogether or something like that just seemed like, I don't know, like it just seemed like a negation of just very basic things that like people would still have disagreements about stuff. People would still have, you would still need to organize coalitions to make certain social decisions and all this kind of stuff. So it was like, a lot of the stuff around Chantal Mouffe and that I used to, and Ernest Laclau, and, was arguing about this kind of stuff, saying that, like, well, this antagonism that you see in politics is just, it's always there. There's always going to be these kind of, differences between people or something like that articulate themselves in this particular way. So anyways, the stuff that I was reading argues against that, not directly, but like it argues that, like, Marx believed that that our certain conception of politics is internal to capitalism, kind of thing, like that our idea of morality as we think of it is internal to class society. Mm-hmm. And that the reason why that is the case is because it's basically like our response to a certain problem set. It's like, when we're thinking about morality, we're thinking in terms of certain types of scarcity, certain types of, basically that it's like you got this architecture of class society, and when we're thinking in terms of, like, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, whatever, you shouldn't steal, you shouldn't do that, it all reduces down eventually to, maintenance of that system. And the problem is that, like, nowadays when you say that, it's very, very quickly turned into this absurd thing where it's like, well, the police only exist to enforce capitalist rule or something like that kind of thing. But it's in an absurd way of being like, well, traffic rules and whether or not you have to file your taxes and all that kind of stuff. Somehow all of that is also capitalist rule in some evil way. Kind of thing.
I mean, like everything, everything is sustaining capitalist rule, because that's what we live in.
Yeah. So it's like, well, you could get rid of the police, and then all of that other stuff would just keep going along for some reason, kind of thing.
Right.
And that always seemed kind of silly to me. And but if you think of it in a more long-term thing of, no, all of those rules about stealing or whatever kind of thing are internal to the certain set of institutions. And that if you move into the future where a lot of those institutions have been changed in different ways to build a certain type of communist economy or whatever, none of that will make sense anymore. That's all that matters. Like, that's the core argument. It's not that, like, morality won't exist or something like that kind of thing. It's just that the problems that people worry about and think about and try to maintain in terms of, like, a hegemony just won't make sense. Like, it just,
it'll be like those laws in, like, states that are really weird, like alligators aren't allowed to wear hats and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be, like a defunct law or whatever they call them, but, like, it just won't make sense. But I guess the thing that stuck with me that I always had a issue with was that you might still have the same institutions as, like, architecture around it, kind of thing. Like, as you're saying, like, you might still have a law in the books. It's just that it won't be relevant to people's lives. It won't be relevant or it might be relevant as a ritual or something like that kind of thing, right? Like, there could still be a president, maybe, you don't know. Like, you might have something like that. It's just that it's just something that exists on paper. And it's not even that it wouldn't have an effect. Like, it might have a very large effect, but that effect is basically, like, has so much inertia behind it that it's not politically salient. Like, that's the key, is that, like, it's not that politics wouldn't exist, it's just that politics wouldn't be salient to what people are talking about.
Sure. I think
it wouldn't take up any of your time. It wouldn't take up any of your mental space.
Right. Yeah. I think a lot of, like, Sharia kind of has worked that way in various times and places where, like, it's a state or some sort of situation where Sharia is like the law of the land. It's an Islamic polity of some kind. And so certain laws are like in the Quran. You can't really like say that you're Islamic without saying like this is also the case, like that we're going to have these laws and stuff. So, and most of those ones that are in the Quran are very harsh. Like the punishments are very harsh. So like the standards of enforcement were very high, and in many cases, like they just never came to the point of like actually having to apply the punishments. Like, you know, the classic examples of like you need 4 witnesses to witness adultery or whatever. So in many cases that just like wasn't really, it never really came up. It was more just like on the books as like a thing of like, this is morally wrong and it carries a harsh punishment because that's how wrong it is. So you shouldn't do it. But it was never really, I mean, I'm speaking generally, or I'm speaking about like in best case scenarios. It's certainly the case, and we see this all over the place today with like ISIS and the Taliban and all this kind of stuff, where like these laws take a big emphasis and they like love to like punish people with this kind of stuff. But like in better situations, those types of things were more just like, you know, don't do this, and God takes it very seriously. You know, if it comes up and there's enough evidence to bear, like, you will be punished for it. But it just doesn't really happen because there's so many ways to kind of get out of it and stuff. So I kind of see this as like a parallel situation, maybe. Like if we get to a point where basic needs are just met because of the way the economy is structured, and there's not like a scarcity of like food and just basic services and stuff, then stuff like petty theft maybe is less of a real issue. Like we might still think of like stealing as a bad thing, but it's not something that it's like nobody ever steals. Like you don't even think about it because there's like, what are you going to steal, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Lenin, so in Russia, like the turn of the century and stuff, like for like teaching at like schools and stuff like that, like students would copy books kind of thing, like have copy books where they would you know, there might be like, I don't know, like the 10 Commandments or something like that. And they have to like write out the 10 Commandments a bunch of times, or like, you know, memorize it and debate about it and stuff and kind of thing. And so moral teaching a lot of the time was very rote, very like direct, very like, you know, I should never do this. You know, this is not this, you know, very, very like formulaic and repetitive and, you know, but also like aspirational, you know, moral or something like that kind of thing. Like saying like, these are all the good things that you should do or whatever, and that kind of thing too, or I shouldn't do. And what Lenin said was that like, you know, he's not saying, you know, he said that like in the future, when there's like a communist society and stuff like that, he said all of those things that are in those books, like the good parts at least kind of thing, they will all be true. Like they will all come true. Like, you know, they will all be realized, you know, but that's not how you realize them kind of thing. It's not by like, you know, copying out the things and stuff like that do it, whatever. It's by creating the conditions where people can actually live a moral life and stuff like that. So that always kind of stuck with me, where it's this idea that like, and it makes more sense to me now, at least, where it's like, you know, if people are stuck in a certain mode of life that encourages them towards negative things or something like that, whatever, in lots of ways, then, you know, that obviously they're set up for failure to some extent kind of thing. But like, he's saying that like, you can imagine sort of a future, whether or not that's actually possible is another kind of side thing. But like, you can imagine this future where people just, you know, it's not by priests hectoring people and telling them they have to do these things and writing them out 100 times and all that kind of stuff. It won't be that causes the people to be moral. It will be the fact that like, you know, they get up in the morning, what they have to do. They have to kind of think of, you know, they're just thinking of ways how they can help people around them, basically, right? They're just thinking, because they've been facilitated with that by like an enormous buildup of social power or whatever, so, you know, capital, whatever you want to call it, that just basically lets them do that. And so that's interesting to me too. And yeah, I don't know. I like that way of thinking of it better than this idea that somehow, there's this idea that somehow in a catastrophic collapse or something, you just get rid of all of the existing institutions or something, that somehow spontaneously you would get a moral outcome or something like that from that. That's not going to happen, obviously. And there's also, I mean, the reason why this is debated all is because the revolutionary states that sort of came out of, the Leninist revolutions and all this kind of stuff, basically claimed, well, and Lenin himself had said, once you have a revolution, you kind of have to throw out all the old liberal moralism and all that. Kind of, you can't guide your society by that, because it's kind of fake and is designed to uphold capitalism and all that kind of stuff. And you can't just not have any control because you're fighting this revolution and you have to build the conditions for people to build up. Well, the sort of in-between model that ended up getting created ended up being very cynical because of that, right? It was basically like, Lenin said something like, freedom in capitalist society is, so in revolutionary society, Lenin said that, like, it is true that freedom is precious. It's so precious that it should be rationed or something like that kind of thing, right? Like, so it's like, it's this idea that, like, if you're in a revolutionary system, it's almost like, because that morality is a contingent in the institutions and all that, you can basically do whatever you feel like, and it ended up producing a very cynical outcome or something like that. And that's dangerous, obviously. I mean, that led to all sorts of abuses by officials and all that kind of stuff, and terrible social compromises and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, so that's obviously a dead end, but it's kind of like, if you lean on the liberal model and say, yeah, we need to have all these democratic forms, we need to build up our society as, like, to self-rule and all this kind of stuff, then it's like, yeah, but that might just reproduce capitalist expectations and stuff like that too. So I don't know what the actual solution to that kind of thing is. I tend to lean towards the little more liberal / libertarian kind of view of, like, saying, well, no, that just means you need to, like, have radical democracy and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, it's weird because it's like that radical democracy and all that stuff is basically like, it's a transitory kind of thing, because you can imagine that in the future that just won't be salient, so yeah, anyways, so
yeah, it's interesting to me. I don't even really think of it as like a problem. It's more like, this is just like almost like a mechanical sort of thing of, like, if things change in some fundamental level, like at the level of, like, the mode of production, then our relation to morality and the law will also change. And I don't really see it as something that, like, how do we fix a problem here? It's more like that's just how things work, I guess, which maybe is closer in line to that view of that people, you kind of opened with, about how people think about Marx as being like almost amoral or something, like, or Marxism as being some kind of like amoral thing, where it's like, no, it's not about morality. It's just about, like, embodying this historical process and all this kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think that's sort of the part of the solution, is that, like, it's like, okay, well, we've got a culture where I currently think of things in terms of liberal society and stuff because I grew up in a liberal society.
Yeah.
So, that's just, it's a very basic thing. So, I don't know. I think that's part of the solution, is you're like, if you're going to have a transitional form, you have to kind of say, well, it has to be democratic or whatever in certain respects, and that, because that is the kind of society we have. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. It's sort of tautological, but, like, it makes sense to me.
Sure. I think I get it, yeah. All right, yeah, so let's finish up here with some quick questions. How about this one? Tom, should we create a Muslim motorcycle gang? I don't really like motorcycles, to be honest. I'm one of those cucks that thinks they're like dangerous and stuff. So you go and do you, but not for me.
What would be a good name for a Muslim motorcycle gang, though? Other than like Holy Rollers, like what would be?
Something about Do motorcycle gangs, like, do they do the black flag thing, or was that just like hardcore punk bands and stuff? Because black flag is also associated with Islam, so that could work.
Halal Angels.
Yeah,
I don't know.
That's pretty good. Yeah, I don't know. There's all kinds of like Turkic tribes you could name your gang after. Like Muslim Turkic conquerors and stuff. Call yourself like the Ghaznavids or whatever. I don't know. I'm obviously not very good at this.
Sure.
All right. Let's do another one here. How about this? Do you think there's a new special heaven for people who get vaccinated? I feel like God is not going to care at all about this vaccination stuff. Like whether people are doing it or not, you can be like, okay, great, whatever. Did you, did you treat your parents right? Did you hurt anybody? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that the morality part of it would be motivations and knowledge and all that kind of stuff. Like I mean, if you just didn't get it because you're like being vindictive in some way or something like that kind of thing, like you're being like.
Or on the flip side, if you got it and you were like, good, I hope all the unvaccinated people die now, and that's also not a good thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So next one says, if I drive around Chicago with my windows down blaring YCW, what are the odds that Muslim Tom will hear it and freak the hell out? Very low, because there's a very low chance that I would be outside to hear it. So, sure. Knock yourself out.
Mm-hmm. Would you be freaked out if you heard someone listening to it? You're just walking by.
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't
For
freak
us, maybe,
me out.
Yeah.
It would be. I'd be very curious. I'd be like, "Oh man, what the hell?"
I guess people don't know what you look like in general. I was gonna say, has anyone ever stopped you or asked you about it? But yeah, I guess not. But
no.
Yeah. Would that weird you out if someone recognized you?
A little bit, probably. Yeah. I mean, there was one time, I think I've told this story, but there was one time in college when this was like in the Something Awful days where like that was how I was known online, where I like went to this party and apparently someone there like heard that I was there and knew about me from like Something Awful and was like really pissed and was like, that Maoist hardline asshole. Apparently he was like angrily like ranting about this. And I didn't see it, but one of my friends came and told me that was happening. So I was like, all right, let's get out of here. That was very strange. I mean, I'm not even sure if that actually happened. That seems so bizarre, but I also like my friend wasn't really clued into all this. So like, I don't know where he would have, there's a lot of things that like don't add up for that to just be him like making something up, So that was very, very odd. So sometimes I do think about that, like if I'm on the train or something, I'm thinking like, how many people on this train have like ever read a tweet of mine or something, Yeah.
It's strange.
Yeah, it kind of makes you like just imagine if you like had real celebrity where like everybody just knows your name, everyone knew stuff about you, you know, like that is just crazy. I don't understand why people want that.
Yeah, that is strange. Yeah,
I like being anonymous and just like, I don't gain anything from all these people like knowing about me. Okay, are vaccine passports fascist creep or just normal and good? I don't see it being really like a big positive thing. I don't think it's some scary fascist thing or whatever, but definitely see it going bad ways more than good ways. I don't really think that it's such a great thing. I guess it's convenient is the main benefit of it. but it also seems pretty easy to, like, counterfeit it and get around it and all kinds of stuff like that. It doesn't really have like a strong legal mandate to enforce it or whatever. And it also, I don't know. I think in general, a lot of things that are anything that's going to be kind of divisive like that is probably going to be used in pretty bad ways these days. So doesn't seem great.
Yeah, I guess like you got to think it too, like in terms of like how long are these things supposed to be in effect or like used or whatever? You know what I mean? Like, is it something that like it can't be the fact that like 10 years from now we're going to be showing them. You know what I mean? Like, it just won't even.
I mean,
sense.
Some people are kind of like referencing like the Patriot Act with this kind of stuff. I think that's a little bit silly. Yeah. I don't know. It also isn't like a real infringement on your rights. Like, you can't go to some bar or something. Like, grocery stores, at least from what I've seen here, it says like mask or vaccine, basically. So either you wear a mask or you need to be vaccinated, but no one checks that. So
yeah,
my assumption is that people who are vaccinated are also still wearing masks, and people who are not wearing masks never got vaccinated, and so it's just like it's just really stupid. But I don't know. I don't really get a strong sense that there's like any kind of big lockdown on like people's rights or whatever that there's a lot of crying about. Yeah. But it also just doesn't seem like this is a vehicle for anything good.
Well, yeah, like I'm not sure. I don't know how much it's like actually. I guess the idea is that it encourages people to, because I don't think that like it seems like a bit of like security theater, kind of stuff. It's like I don't know how much it's actually going to reduce the caseload. It can only really do it indirectly if it's like you're creating an annoyance for someone that like you're impeding someone's life so that they're more likely to take the vaccine so that you don't have to worry about that, so that therefore you're increasing the vaccination rate so that caseload might go down. That seems kind of, I'm not sure that you're going to get like, that doesn't seem like a public health debate thing kind of thing. That seems more like, I don't know. It doesn't seem plausible to me that that's actually going to be the way that you solve the problem.
Yeah.
So I guess like in edge cases, like if it saves a few lives or something like that, that would be positive. But like,
I mean, even then, like, I mean, is that really going to save people's? I just don't.
Sure.
It's not a very strong measure in terms of preventing whatever they're trying to prevent. I don't know. Just seems like you said, theater.
For the fall in Canada, they're going to send, I think, like for like international travel or something, give us like documents that we can use to show that we've been vaccinated or something like that. And I guess that makes sense too. That again, that is more. I think even in that situation, that's more like a defense for the traveler.
Yeah, sure.
Than it is against like
that's a good idea. There's nothing wrong with that. Or
something. Yeah, and I think that's fine. I think a lot of it is just right now. It's like I don't know. It just seems like so many things are like up in the air in terms of like people's theories about stuff that you kind of whipsaw between like one person doing something that is like extra safe just to try to like keep things moving along. And then other people like being like, we don't need any of these rules or something like that kind of thing. Like it like jumps all over the place. Like so in Ontario, like one of the top doctors on like one of those like panels, or whatever, like COVID panel, recommendation panel or something like that, resigned the other day because he said that like the government is hiding the number of cases they expect in the fall and stuff like that. That like he thinks that there's going to be like the fourth wave. We're kind of like in a sort of start of a fourth wave to some extent, but he thinks it's just going to be like a huge case count again. Which anyway, so he resigned, I guess, because of that. Like he said that they were hiding it, and like that kind of thing is not encouraging to me, kind of thing. I don't know. That doesn't seem like we're headed in a good place. In terms of like in Canada, I mean, in Ontario at least, like over 80% of people have gotten at least one shot, kind of thing. At least, like I think it's like 85% or maybe more now. So if you can't get things under control with that level of uptake for the vaccine and stuff, like that basically I feel like things are still being kind of poorly managed. But at the same time, I have no idea what the alternative is. But you know what I mean? Like I don't know what we should be doing. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. It wouldn't surprise me at all if it turns out like, oh, the vaccine didn't really stop anything, and then we just kind of started to relax on a bunch of things because we had this magic vaccine thing that was supposed to fix everything, and oh, whoops, didn't actually work out that way. That would not surprise me at all. I don't expect people to really do any kind of reflection on that and be like, maybe I was wrong about this or anything like that, but I don't know.
I mean, it seems to be helping a lot in a certain extent. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not like solving the problem,
Right.
But like it's
that's the problem, really.
It's mitigating
is the way people treat it. It's like either it's some kind of thing that's going to make you sterile and give you autism and stuff, or it just is like a silver bullet that just kills the virus immediately, and you're never going to have to worry about it ever again. Like it's neither of those things. It's a rushed solution to something which we don't know how effective it really is. Like they're talking about having booster shots and stuff, and I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, and China, it seems like was able to mostly resolve the situation to like get it under control to some extent without the vaccines.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like at the start, at least mostly get it sort of under control. And not only that, but no one denies that their vaccines are, it looks like, less effective than the mRNA ones, whatever, the mRNAs, whatever. So it's one of those things where collective approaches is still the main thing, but like, like it's not necessarily going to be this one technology that solves it all, kind of thing. So yeah. But I don't know what our political will is about that or whatever kind of thing. Like, if there's more lockdowns again or whatever, people are just going to freak out. So, yeah.
Yeah. I'm here for it. I'm happy for the 1,000 years.
Yeah, sure.
So here's a question that was sort of related to this last one, so I figured I'd just read this. It says, why is there no critical discourse from the left about vaccine passports? It seems like a no-brainer that socialists would be against mandatory vaccination and the infringement upon civil liberties that the passports imply. I don't know about that. I very rarely read these publications, but I find myself constantly checking Jacobin, Current Affairs, Dissent, Maclean's, Passage et al. I don't know even half of those. Searching desperately for anything so that I can feel less alone and less insane. There are a few dirtbags like the Fed Post who are openly critical, but it doesn't help my sanity that the only leftists, in quotes, taking a stance on this topic are very much part of that horseshoe where left and right become, shall we say, somewhat nebulous. I hate myself for turning to the likes of Brett Weinstein and the Dark Horse podcast, who are unambiguously part of the intellectual dark web. They often refer proudly to their friends Barry Weiss and Jordan Peterson. But at least they have some fucking academic bona fides, so I don't feel like I'm just listening to pure Alex Jones tier shit. But at the same time, I don't feel far off. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I guess that is part of the problem with I don't know. I really, this does grate on me. I get like the reasoning behind this kind of stuff sometimes, where like if something is associated with a certain political stand, then it's just not talked about at all. And I get that, and so. I think that like there has been some stuff, not vaccine passports directly, but there was some stuff here and there about like not supporting open borders and all that kind of stuff. Like people like critical of being closed down. I think in the UK it's more popular, in terms of like if you're looking for like English language stuff about like criticizing lockdown of the borders regimes. Yeah, I mean that's part of it. It is one of those things though. It is hard to for vaccine passports. Like I'm trying to think in terms of like vaccine passports as like their actual effect on people's lives. That would be harmful or something like that. And you would have to think that like certain people, a lot of it would be like border control or certain types of public events. I mean, if someone can't go to like a baseball game because they haven't been vaccinated or something like that, there is a certain thing of like being closed out of society or whatever. I get that is negative, and you might be like 10 steps down the road from now we'll have like you might have to show a green thing on your phone or something that shows that you haven't been disobedient online or something like that kind of thing. I get that, like you can kind of like you can imagine this getting a thing, but I don't feel like we're there yet about that kind of stuff. Or it's like we're already 10 steps beyond that when it comes to border control and stuff,
mm-hmm.
Where you're, I don't know, the second you try to get across the American border, like you're already giving up so many other rights that like it's pretty tough. But yeah, I think that like in terms of like the passport as like actual passport kind of thing, like as like border control stuff, is probably where you would find the most criticism on the left. But at the same time, I mean, there is just a very rational, basic logic to it that you don't want people coming in on airplanes or whatever that have a disease or something like that. Like it's just if you abstract it into this like libertarian thing so quickly, it starts to be about the debate more than about the fact that like there's a disease.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree.
And that's just a very basic thing. I think that you just have to, kind of deal with the fact that like, it's a very, very logical thing for not want people transmitting a disease across large periods of the earth or large, distances and stuff. So,
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's wrap up with this last one here. It says, can you guys switch roles for one episode and have Dawn introduce the pod? So that's up to you. I'm willing to relinquish my throne for maybe one episode.
Sure. I think both of us are creatures of habit where we like to know expectations, like to know what we're doing in any given situation or something like that. And it's usually back and forth quickly before we start about that we're settled, that we know there's nothing else to talk about before we start, and then we get into it and stuff. And I don't know. I think that like if the podcast does continue on for some time, I can imagine it like 50 years from now, Tom would say it the exact same way every time, and then we would get into it. So unless there's a reason to change, I'm not sure. We'll see. But
yeah, it kind of helps me to say it the same way every time, because it's like this is how you start, and then once it starts, like that's the easier part. It's more like just the immediate starting thing. It's hard to like just start, I guess. I don't know. I also really don't like cold open style podcasts. I like a little bit of like, okay, into the podcast zone.
Sure.
So yeah, kind of sounds like a no, but we'll see. Maybe it'll happen someday.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So I think that'll do it for today.
Sure.
So if you guys enjoyed this episode and you'd like a second episode every week, you can get that by subscribing to our Patreon. You'll get that as well as access to our Discord where you can chat with us in our lovely community. If you want to send us questions, you can go to the Twitter account at YouCan'tWinPod, and you'll find a link to it pinned there. And so thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
Thanks, guys. Bye.